Okay, and the final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 17004 in the name of Rhoda Grant on combating commercial sexual exploitation. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons and invite Rhoda Grant to open the debate around 7 minutes. Ms Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking the members who signed my motion to enable this debate to happen? It has been a long-held view of the Scottish Government and indeed of this Parliament that prostitution is violence against women. It is the epitome of inequality when a man can buy a woman for their own pleasure, a pleasure that has at its very core the overpowering of another's free will in return for money. It exploits the seller's need for money to take their power and agency away from them. And by its very nature, the payment is to negate the need for consent. But you cannot buy consent. We all know that prostitution is inherently dangerous. Those selling sex often face rape and abuse from sex buyers. Despite the recognition that this is violence against women, there is little in our law that protects women from this violence. Indeed, it criminalises them and exonerates the perpetrators. I commend Ash Regan for bringing forward her Prostitution Offences and Support Scotland bill. We need to decriminalise those who sell sex, who we recognise are being subjected to violence, and we need to hold to account the sex buyers who perpetrate that violence and create demand. While our law does hold men who curb crawl to account, it does not hold pimping websites to account. Neither does it those who profit from prostitution by hosting those adverts or those who place them. According to police figures from 2020, 84 women were sexually exploited by trafficking gangs in Scotland. 9 of them were underage, the youngest being 13 years of age. And we know that is a tiny fraction of all those who are exploited. Many don't believe that they're being exploited as they came here of their own free will, trying to find a better life, blaming themselves for the situation they now find themselves in. Others fear retribution from traffickers and flee. The police use the pimping websites to identify trafficked women. The cross-party group on commercial sexual exploitation carried out an inquiry into these websites and found they enabled violence against women and yet were subject to no redress at all. I'm also a member of the Model for Scotland campaign group that campaigns for a law that effectively stops this exploitation. In 1999, Sweden became the first country to combat demand for prostitution by criminalising paying for sex, while decriminalising victims of sexual exploitation. And evidence shows that in Sweden, the proportion of men paying for sex had dropped from 12.7% in 1996 to 7.6% in 2008. That was the lowest level of demand in Europe. And public attitudes changed. The law acts as a deterrent to sex trafficking, and other aspects of their society also changed for the better. The sharing of caring responsibilities, the narrowing of the gender pay gap. For laws to be effective, we need to empower women and address vulnerability. No one chooses to sell sex as an easy option. It's a choice made when no other option exists, when there is indeed no choice. This makes it inherently exploitative, one human being exploiting another's vulnerability. Therefore, support to exit must provide health support, but it also must support empowerment to work and to build a future. We need support services, including the police, that are readily available and properly trained to identify this abuse, to intervene and to support those facing exploitation. In 2020, the University of Dublin examined the Irish law change and reported an increased willingness among women to report crimes committed against them, and in their improved relationship with the Garda overall. Similar outcomes have been reported elsewhere, and this demonstrates that change needs to be met by a police force able to provide that right support. Many of those in prostitution have multiple vulnerabilities: the lack of money, childhood sexual abuse. Looked after children are particularly vulnerable. Take the case of Ava, who grew up in a chaotic home life. She battled anxiety and depression and was moved into supported accommodation for her own safety after a couple had groomed her into selling sex. Unfortunately, as is often the case, the accommodation was targeted by men looking to build relationships with young people and offer them drugs and alcohol in return for sex. She was approached there by a 20-year-old man who built her trust and offered her free drugs. Ava did not recognise this as grooming. She introduced her friends to him, and they would gather at his flat for drink and drugs. And he asked her and her friends for sex in payment for that drink and drugs. He then had Ava sell sex to other men to help him out financially. She believed he was her boyfriend, and she agreed to do that to help him. She didn't get involved with this man to set up a business. She was vulnerable. He gave her time and attention, as well as drugs and alcohol. He groomed her into prostitution. In Scotland today, she is committing a crime, but those who buy sex with her from her boyfriend are not. When people see the reality of prostitution, no one can be under the impression that this is harmless. Care for Scotland undertook a Savanta poll of more than 2,000 UK adults, which found that 7 in 10 people back a ban on pimping websites that advertise sex for sale. In 2024, the report of the UN Special Rapporteur into violence against women and girls, its causes and consequences, recommended that states adopt an abolitionist legal framework and its 5 pillars, including the decriminalisation of women in prostitution, providing comprehensive support and exiting pathways, criminalising the purchase of sexual acts, criminalising all forms of pimping, and implementing sensitisation campaigns for sexual act buyers. We must take that action, and I would urge the Scottish Government to work with Ash Regan to ensure we create a model for Scotland that combats exploitation and prostitution, to create a Scotland where women are truly equal.
Thank you, Ms Grant. And now we move to the open debate. I call first Bill Kidd to be followed by Sharon Dowie. Around 4 minutes. Mr Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to today's motion in the name of our colleague Rhoda Grant, and I would like to begin by paying tribute to her long-standing work in the area of tackling human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, particularly her advocacy for women and girls who so often feel failed by the system. It's a painful truth that in modern Scotland prostitution remains a legal avenue through which violence against women is perpetrated. This is not just a contradiction, it's a failure of justice. The Scottish Government rightly recognises prostitution as a form of violence against women and girls, yet we are faced with the grim reality that the law as it stands does not yet reflect that recognition. And let's be crystal clear, no woman aspires to be sexually exploited, no girl dreams of being bought and sold. And in this chamber, we have a responsibility not only to condemn this form of abuse, but to act legislatively, practically and compassionately to bring it to an end. The report by A Model for Scotland, led by survivors, is not just a policy document, it's a testimony. It's a call for those who have lived in this reality, who know its cost and who refuse to accept that the next generation should suffer the same fate. It tells us that reducing demand is the key to reducing harm. It tells us that we must act on the so-called pimping websites, these online platforms that act as digital marketplaces for the commodification of human beings. These sites are not neutral spaces. They are profiting greedily from exploitation, acting as intermediaries between buyers and vulnerable women. It tells us also that we must criminalise the act of paying for sex, not to punish those in survival prostitution, but to hold to account those who fuel and finance the trade. We cannot say we oppose violence against women and then allow a system to flourish in which women are bought, sold and discarded like consumer goods. But the third and equally vital part of this model is support. That means decriminalising those who are being exploited. It means recognising that the women in prostitution are not criminals. They are victims of inequality, poverty, trauma and abuse, and they deserve not just our compassion, but concrete, sustained support. Housing, trauma-informed services, mental health support, education, employment. These are not luxuries, they are necessities if we are to help women exit exploitation and rebuild their lives. We know that the so-called Nordic model, as is mentioned, sometimes called the equality model, actually works. It's been adopted in countries such as Sweden, Norway, France, Ireland and others. In those countries, we have seen reductions in demand, reductions in trafficking and improved outcomes for women. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls has called on states to adopt these very reforms, and so has the European Parliament. So we have countless survivors, researchers and human rights organisations. If we are to live up to our obligations under the Istanbul Convention, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and indeed our own human rights framework in Scotland, then this is the direction that we must take. Presiding Officer, this is not about morality, it's about human dignity. It's about ensuring that no woman in Scotland is ever left in a position where her only choice is to be bought and used by someone who holds economic and social power over her. It's about saying clearly, as a Parliament, that women are not commodities, that the buying and selling of human beings had no place in a just society. So I would like to add my voice to the calls from across this chamber, from survivor-led organisations and from international human rights bodies. Let us move forward with the proposed Prostitution Offences and Support Scotland Bill. Let us end the legal impunity for those who exploit. Let us dismantle the online infrastructure that profits from pain. And let us support, not criminalise, those who have been caught in this cycle of abuse. Scotland has the opportunity to lead, to make a principled, progressive stand for justice. Let's take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Kidd. I now call Sharon Dowie to be followed by Ash Regan. Around 4 minutes. Ms Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I thank Rhoda Grant for bringing this important debate to the Chamber. This is a topic which is rightly receiving increased attention in this Parliament and beyond. And I look forward to also engaging in the bill of another colleague, Ash Regan, as she brings her member's bill into the legislative process. I think we can all agree that the protection of vulnerable women, many of whom have had miserable lives at the hands of abusers, criminals and opportunists, is paramount. As we've heard in evidence many times, there is often a succession of terrible events in a woman's life which brings her to the point of prostitution or sex work. Then, when she finds herself in this situation, it is almost impossible for her to escape. And we also know that it isn't only Scottish women who find themselves forced down this destructive path. For human traffickers, especially those in places like Romania and Bulgaria, Scotland appears to be an attractive place for them to send women. Police here spend huge amounts of time trying to intervene at airports and other entry points to make sure women forced into coming here from these countries can be supported before they disappear into the hands of serious organised criminals. It's a tall order for officers in Scotland to dismantle international organisations who make millions from the lives of young women, many of whom are underage and forcibly addicted to drugs. But we in Parliament can do our bit by making Scotland a more hostile place for these twisted and dangerous individuals to target. We may not agree on every facet of this motion or indeed Ms Reagan's bill, but I think we would all like for the same outcome, that the days of Scotland being a soft touch for the criminal sex trade to be consigned to history. Presiding Officer, on this subject, we do have the benefit of being able to look at how other countries have addressed this problem. It's important that we learn from their progress and from their mistakes. We can examine how some Nordic countries have flipped the onus of criminality from being on the women providing the sex work onto the male customers who are pursuing it. We can look to Northern Ireland, where offenders engaged in human trafficking and sexual exploitation receive fines of up to £1,000 and up to a year's imprisonment. We should also learn from those who have been tasked with dealing with this problem in the past. Many of us here would have been moved by a recent account provided by commentator Susan Dalgetty, a former senior councillor in the City of Edinburgh. She recalled in an article in The Scotsman how applications would come before committee for the capital's notorious saunas. On the face of it, these were meant to be above-board facilities, simply offering an innocent sauna experience for anyone who wanted it. But Ms Dalgetty told how everyone knew, from the police to council officials, exactly what was going on, and nodded through these de facto brothels anyway. Of course, she now regrets that such attitudes prevailed, and it's important now we don't take a similar approach to sex work and prostitution. And we must pay attention to the women themselves who've lived through this. What would they do to solve the problem? Presiding Officer, the Scottish Conservatives look forward to participating in this debate going forward, to working constructively with all other parties in the Chamber, and to finally reaching a resolution to this long-standing, complex and deep-rooted issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Dowie. I now call Ash Regan to be followed by John Mason. Around 4 minutes, Ms Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'd like to commend Rhoda Grant for bringing this important motion for debate this evening, and also for her long-standing commitment to work in this area. I'd also commend the CPG for the excellent work that they've done recently. And I'd also like to extend my thanks to the members of this Parliament and those outside this Parliament who have supported me in my journey to getting the bill to this stage that it's at now. Prostitution, as we've heard this evening, is a system of violence that reduces women to commodities and, I believe, affects all women's ability to then achieve equality. And there is, I think we all recognise, an absolute epidemic of violence against women and girls in our society today. And I believe this is a very important area that we should not look away from. I think it's connected to all of that, and I think it's a great place to start. So it's already policy and strategy that prostitution is violence against women. It's the Scottish Government position, it's also COSLA's position, and it's reflected in the way that we police on this issue. So to put it very simply, the law now needs to be updated. And my unviable bill reflects international best practice and all the available research data as the best way to challenge the demand for prostitution, which is what drives human trafficking, and then reduce the number of women that are then exploited in prostitution, because prostitution is harmful. In all the years that I've been researching and working on this issue, which I think is more than a decade now, and all the women that I have met that have been exploited in prostitution, not one of them wanted to stay in it for a moment longer than they had to. And in many cases, although they'd left the sex trade decades before, you can see that the effects of what they've been through still haunt them and still harm them to this day. One trafficking victim that I met in a safe room in Glasgow said that she'd been trafficked, and it was so bad, it was so horrific what was happening to her, that she prayed every day that she would die or that the pimps or punters would kill her. Prostitution cannot be made safe. It is inherently harmful. A US study said that women who are exploited in prostitution are more likely to be murdered than the general population by 18 times. Another study on rates of PTSD put women that had been through prostitution, the rates of PTSD at 70%. That's higher than we see recorded in combat veterans and is consistent with victims of state torture. So there's no way to make it safe. And that being the case, we need to reduce it as much as possible, and my bill will do that. And if we don't change the law, we are protecting and enabling pimps and punters. We are protecting and enabling abusers and exploiters. And if anyone doesn't believe me on that, even a cursory glance at the contents of Punternet would confirm this. This is a website where men review women like takeaway meals, rating their bodies, their compliance and their willingness to endure abuse. This is not a normal job. This is a marketplace of degradation and abuse. And if we do change the law, we will be protecting the victims. So girls that have entered prostitution as children, girls who have been through the care system, girls who've been victims of child sex abuse, and girls and women who have been coerced and trafficked into this trade. So surely, in modern Scotland, we know, or we should know, who the exploiters are and who the victims are. And it is long past time that the law reflected that.
Thank you, Ms Regan. I now call John Mason to be followed by Carol Mock in around 4 minutes. Mr Mason.
Thank you very much, and also thank Rhoda Grant for bringing this important issue before Parliament today. First, I wanted to speak to be sure that there would be at least a few men taking part in this debate. The cross-party group on commercial sexual exploitation tends to have mainly women attending, both among MSPs and other members and speakers. That is understandable, as women are by far the main victims of CSE. However, men are the main perpetrators, as we have heard, and we need to hear some of them speaking in favour of this motion and in favour of Ash Regan's bill. Now, I can accept that a very few women see prostitution as a glamorous career, can be choosy who their clients are, and are largely in control of what happens. However, as other speakers have said today, and as we have heard repeatedly at the cross-party group and other meetings, in the vast majority of cases, the women involved are clearly victims and do not want to be involved in this trade. We have so often heard from survivors how they were treated as men's possessions, to be bought and sold, and expected to take part in various weird sexual activities just to satisfy the warped desires of some men. Most women are only involved in prostitution because they are in the direst of circumstances, be that exploited by a partner or very often in financial need and debt. We saw that in the Ken Loach film, I, Daniel Blake, from 2016, where it was only because of her need to feed her children that Katie in the film turns to selling sex. How can we say that we are serious about tackling male violence against women when at the same time we allow women to be bought and sold by men? We all accept that there is a gender pay gap. Women still get overlooked for promotion in some jobs. Misogyny happens, as does domestic abuse. All of that is broadly accepted to be happening, and the vast majority of us are signed up to tackling these interrelated sets of problems. So surely we also have to accept that being able to buy sex is not unrelated to these other issues and devalues women in the eyes of boys and men. Similarly, we are all signed up to ending human trafficking. Yet we need to remember that one of the drivers of human trafficking is for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation, whether that be from Nepal to India or from Eastern Europe to Scotland and the UK. I would not argue that changing the law in itself will sort everything, but we understand from the Nordic countries that such a change, along with education, is part of achieving more respect for women and promoting more equality for women in all parts of society. And I have to say we are very slow at making progress on this subject. I became a councillor in Glasgow 27 years ago in 1998, and I was there for just over 10 years. This subject was on the agenda then, thanks to excellent Labour councillors like Jim Coleman, with the council, police and health services all on board. Roots out was a frequently used phrase at that time, with a recognition that not only do we need to come down more heavily on the purchases of sex, but we also need to give more support to women who want to escape from the trap that they have found themselves in. So here we are in 2025, and very little seems to have changed. A number of other countries have moved against CSE, and so far we have not, despite the fact that the SNP as a party supported Ash Regan's position, and as the motion states, the Scottish Government recognises prostitution as violence against women. I would have to say that I think there has been a certain timidity on the part of successive governments. So I do wholeheartedly endorse Rhoda Grant's motion today. I also wholeheartedly endorse Ash Regan's bill, and I express my frustration at the lack of progress in Scotland when other countries have been making real steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mason. And I call Carol Mochan to be followed by Stephen Kerr. Around 4 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank Rhoda Grant for bringing this motion to the Chamber? It's an important debate which has not moved on in this Parliament as it might. I support the motion today and the introduction of the proposed bill, Prostitution Offences and Support Scotland Bill. And I really want to pay tribute to Rhoda Grant and others within the Chamber who continually raise the voices of those that often have no avenue to do so themselves. I also thank women who have been trapped within the sex trade for coming to Parliament, speaking to us as parliamentarians about the reality of life led by so many women. The grooming, the vulnerability, the trapped and helpless, hopeless feeling that many women spoke about. These conversations have really developed my thinking in this area. If we are to truly realise our shared ambition of eradicating male violence against women and girls, Scotland needs to have a progressive legal model to tackle prostitution, a model that shifts the burden of criminality off victims of sexual exploitation and onto the people who perpetrate and profit from such activity. And as I have said, spending time talking to women about this trade, I can see no other way to ensure we do start to protect women and girls. We know that much of this activity is underground and not visible to many within society, and the attitudes to prostitution for many years has seen women as being in the wrong or unable to better themselves, but in reality it is a business which makes profit from the vulnerability of so many women. In a previous debate within this Parliament, my colleague Rhoda Grant made the following point, that it is essential to deal with demand because trafficking for sexual exploitation is the most profitable form of modern slavery in the world, and it is fuelled by demand. It is a global industry, and we know that there's more than 100 billion per year trafficked in this way. And money is such a driver, and to think that money is a driver in manipulating and exploiting vulnerable people, and we know that it's vulnerable women all over the world that are exploited. In earlier debates within the Parliament, we've discussed that in countries that take the more liberal approach of normalising prostitution, there are higher levels of trafficking. And those that take the opposite approach, human trafficking has decreased as a consequence. So this is where the evidence is leading on us, and as legislators in Scotland, we must listen to that evidence and act with some urgency. Apologies. A Nordic model approach, as we've heard from other members, implemented in countries such as Sweden and Norway, finds a more effective solution, I would suggest. These models, criminalising the purchase of sex and decriminalising those who sell it, in my view, recognises the true victims of this exploitation. The bill introduced by the member Ash Regan recognises this and would also add legal rights to support exit services, counselling and real alternatives, aiming to ensure women involved have a genuine path out of prostitution. Something that really struck me in a recent meeting here within the Parliament, where women were discussing just what it is like to be trapped and that they have a feeling that nothing can change. And so I think that is such an important part of the bill that Ash Regan would bring. Given the time, I did want to mention the online pimping websites as others had. If we don't start to tackle this, I think things can only get worse. That these men hide behind the internet and their computers, and we need to look for good examples of how we might be able to change this. In closing, Presiding Officer, can I thank everyone for speaking in the debate, and I hope that the Government can shed some light on the work that they are progressing to move this forward and how they might work with the member Ash Regan on her bill. I think it's so important that we work together, as others have said, and I really thank Rhoda Grant for continuing to push this within the Chamber and out within communities. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Mockham. Now comes the final speaker in the open debate, Stephen Kerr. Again, around 4 minutes. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank Rhoda Grant also for creating the opportunity for us to discuss this in the Chamber. And can I agree with John Mason that men absolutely do need to speak up on this issue. And listening to Ash Regan today, I've learned things that I didn't know, that I wish didn't exist. And I wish her all the very best with her bill, and I hope that we will all work together to make this happen in our country, because this motion, and indeed the bill, is all about affirming a principle that prostitution is not a lifestyle choice. It is a form of violence against women. It is an expression of exploitation, often brutal, often hidden, too often enabled by our current laws. Scotland rightly aspires to be a nation that defends the dignity and worth of every individual. But while we continue to allow the purchase of sex, we're undermining that aspiration. We're failing to deter the demand that fuels not only prostitution, but sex trafficking, two industries that are deeply interlinked. And as the motion says, and I find this deeply disturbing, Scotland has become a destination for traffickers. Why? Because our laws still permit the buying of sex and allow online pimping websites to flourish. Now, Presiding Officer, the evidence is clear. We now have the benefit of decades of international learning from countries that have adopted the so-called Nordic model, a legal framework that criminalises those who buy sex and decriminalises the women who are exploited, and provides exit supports. And there's been a list of countries mentioned. I will recite them. This is not new territory. Sweden, France, Ireland, Iceland have all shown that demand can be reduced, trafficking deterred, and women's lives changed when the law sends a clear moral message. And I am not one who will apologise for the use of the word moral. In Sweden, the proportion of men buying sex halved after the Sex Purchase Act was introduced. Public attitudes shifted profoundly from toleration to rejection of this form of exploitation. Enforcement, education, victim support work together to change not only behaviours but hearts and minds. And France's law has seen over 5,000 sex buyers prosecuted, nearly 600 women supported through funded exit programmes, with 90% of them going on to find stable employment. In Ireland, decriminalisation has empowered women to report violence without fear of criminalisation. So Scotland can and must do the same. And the bill proposed, Prostitution Offences and Support Scotland Bill, provides the vehicle for this change. The bill reflects the international evidence base as well as our moral responsibility. It rightly targets those who exploit, not those who are exploited. It proposes practical, funded support for exiting the sex trade, and it aligns with our international obligations under the Palermo Protocol and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women to actively discourage demand for sexual exploitation. Now, I'm no libertarian. I'm a social conservative. I believe the law must uphold moral order and human dignity. There's nothing empowering about being bought and sold. No economy should tolerate a market in human bodies. No society that claims to stand against violence against women can allow this form of violence to continue unchallenged. So I would say to colleagues, let us show courage. Let us act not in fear of criticism, but in fidelity to the evidence and experience of survivors. I commend the motion and the leadership behind it. I support the bill that flows from it. And I say clearly, Scotland is not for sale. Women are not for sale. And this Parliament will not stand idly by while modern slavery is disguised as choice. And I hope when the Minister comes to reply, we will see beyond all of the party politics that may surround this issue and the people involved with it, in order to see that Scotland rids itself of this terrible reputation as a favoured destination for traffickers.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. I now invite Siobhan Brown to respond to the debate. Minister, around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And firstly, can I thank Rhoda Grant and all those in the Chamber this evening for their considered contributions today on tackling and combating commercial sexual exploitation. And let me just be very clear at the start. We all want to see an end to commercial sexual exploitation in Scotland. If I can just take this opportunity to outline what the Scottish Government is currently doing now to combat this. And I take on John Mason's point that he feels that there hasn't been much progress, and although there hasn't been any legislative progress in recent years, there are things that are currently underway. So I recently invited Rhoda Grant and other MSPs to an update on the work that we have been progressing with Police Scotland to agree a national approach to prostitution known as Operation Begonia. Now, this new Police Scotland approach was adopted just at the end of April, and it recognises those involved in prostitution as victims of exploitation. It will ensure that police more evidently use the powers currently available to them to challenge demand. Through dedicated patrols in areas where street-based prostitution takes place, police will both challenge and deter men's demand. The patrols, which we have provided funding to support, and yes?
It's exactly on that point, Minister, that you've just raised. The powers that the police have are only for combating on-street prostitution, and we think we know, because the data is a bit sketchy, that 90% of prostitution has now moved indoors. Therefore, is it not now the time to update the law and give the police the powers that they now need to combat prostitution?
Minister.
So I thank Ash Regan for that, and I will go on to the online section just further along, because there is work being undertaken in that area as well. So the patrols which are currently provided funding support are currently operational across Dundee, Aberdeen, Glasgow, and working with Police Scotland as we build on this. I recently visited Dundee to see Operation Begonia in practice, and I was able to see what a difference that it did make. And this year, Operation Begonia has carried out 100 patrols, resulting in 42 men being charged and 62 women routed to support services. And as Detective Superintendent Stephen Bertram, who is the lead on prostitution for Police Scotland, has said, this is about building trust and confidence in policing. And I agree, this is key. And I want any women with experience of commercial sexual exploitation to feel able and comfortable engaging with the police to report concerns and access justice and trauma-informed support if they so wish. A new police approach includes the development of new training for police and an awareness programs, and the first of these will take place this month. We're also working with Police Scotland to help strengthen the connections between themselves and local support provisions, as the relationships between the police and local support services play a key role. And later this month, I'll visit a local stakeholder network supporting Begonia in Aberdeen. We will build on this good practice, and we'll hold a meeting at Edinburgh this month to discuss establishing a similar network with local organisations in Edinburgh here too. And ensuring local stakeholders are better connected and have clearer links to local police will help ensure women can have supported access to justice and have clearer routes to local support. A joined-up response will also help us take a preventative approach to tackling exploitation. Informed by the implementation of Begonia, the Scottish Government will always consider what more we can do to combat commercial sexual exploitation. And taking an evidence-based approach, we will consider what further intervention is necessary. And earlier I referenced, and I know that Rhoda Grant did in her motion as well, the importance of learning from international experience. I'm therefore mindful of the difficulty Ireland has had in policing the legislative framework that they were presented with, and the lack of cohesion within support services in France. And both scenarios have led to a review of the approaches in both of these countries. The Scottish Government is working with Police Scotland to better understand any additional powers that they consider are required, and the reasons why to effectively tackle demand, most particularly online. And I think we've got to be mindful. Yes.
Rhoda Grant.
With any piece of legislation, there has to be tweaks to make sure it works properly. But would you not agree that those countries where she's mentioned they've had to make tweaks and indeed invest more in training and support, that the legislation is working well and it's actually preventing violence against women, and that we could learn from that and put this legislation in place which would actually save so many women from suffering violence at the hand of perpetrators.
Minister, I can give you time back for the
absolutely. And
interventions.
the Scottish Government, I have to just be clear, we are not opposed to the intent of this proposed bill by Ms Regan, but I will touch on a few concerns we have later in my speech. But if I could just go back to that we have to be mindful of the challenges online and we need to keep pace with this. And I know that Rhoda Grant and Bill Kidd and Carol Mockin also mentioned this, particularly about the online websites. Now, as we know that the regulation of the internet and online services still remains a reserved matter, but just to alert members, there is currently an amendment going through in the Crime and Policing Bill, which is trying to address this. My officials are talking to the Home Office about this. There is also, my officials are meeting with Ofcom tomorrow to further discuss online safety in respect of human trafficking as well. So this is why, when we're talking about online, is why the Scottish Government are providing funding to support Police Scotland's work to tackle the online aspects of commercial sexual exploitation, increasing their capability in this area. Yes?
Stephen Kerr.
I'm not clear that I understand what the Minister's saying the Government's position is in relation to the bill. I mean, I think she said she was going to talk about that, but she seems to have moved on. Can she be... You are, right.
So I will get to that at the end. I said I will get to that. So this is why we are providing funding, and this is what Rhoda Grant did come to the meeting with Police Scotland recently, and how Police Scotland's work can tackle the online aspects of commercial sexual exploitation, increasing their capability in this area, and also helping inform our approach and how to better reach victims. The Scottish Government's focus will remain on providing a sustainable pathway to enable those involved in prostitution to both exit and fulfil their potential in a sustainable manner. It remains imperative that we change the culture that drives the acceptability of violence against women and girls and commercial sexual exploitation. So we will therefore continue to look at opportunities to support this through educational and public awareness initiatives. And as I said to Mr Kerr and Ms Regan, that the Scottish Government are not opposed to the intent of this bill. And as with all members' bill, we will give it the full and careful consideration and take into account Parliament's scrutiny of the bill. I do have to raise a few concerns that I do have at the moment, is how it's going to work in practice and what the bill intends to be the support for those involved in prostitution and what the cost of this and the quashing previous convictions is something that we cannot support. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Are you taking an intervention? You've concluded. Okay, that concludes the debate and I close this meeting of Parliament.